So I thought maybe I'd just ramble on a little bit longer here, just before the Dodger game starts on the last day of the season here on the Dodger Game channel, which really isn't about the Los Angeles Dodgers, but since pitching for the Dodgers was my dream as a boy growing up, and now I see Clayton Kershiser. Oh my gosh, did I say that? Clayton Kershaw out there trying to live the dream that was mine, trying to model my life after Sandy Koufax as a child, among others. Here we go. Now, so I want to talk about a little bit more about what I was talking about, using the proofs of that using, fake evidence, whatever it takes, these props that have been used in various religions, including Mormonism, for a long time to support a system of enslavement and manipulation of people so that those at the top of the food chain could benefit off the people that they sold these religions to. I've mentioned that these people are generally members of occult religions, so they know what they're doing. They don't actually believe the stuff that they're preaching. As we've seen that usually occultists, often they are Freemasons, are head of these many religions that lead the people, and they're heads of business and society at so many levels in so many areas that the networks that they have together are the things that allow them to jump from being head of the Actors Guild to Governor of California to President of the United States, or Mr. Universe to movie star to Governor of California, or these kinds of things, or an executive with Lufthansa who winds up going to management school in Switzerland and suddenly gets called into the first presidency of the LDS Church to help run the corporate empire. That's why we don't have people, guys that are like, cobblers, shoe repair guys. They aren't in the quorum of the 12. In case you hadn't noticed, these are business executives running a business empire. So we talked about seer stones, dark mirrors, Ouija boards, various forms of revelation that come from the spiritual world, and giving information to people, whether they are spiritualists, whether they're called prophets in Christian type of churches. It looks a little difficult for the church when they try to market the Book of Mormon coming forth from magical devices. So they call them, what did Stephen Smoot call the seer stone? A translation implement or something. Some kind of BS like that. The language is used to try to make it sound like it fits within the context of the story and the theme. Since Christianity has kind of broken away from the magic world in the last, I don't know how many hundreds of years, maybe not that far, really. Joseph Smith's day, we had, he was into the magic world, and a lot of people were into the magic world and Christianity simultaneously, and seeming like it was okay. Now it's only okay for the leaders, and they don't want us to know it. So they market this stuff in a way that tries to make it believable for us. So first they decided it really didn't look so good for him to be using, something equivalent to a crystal ball to be coming up with the Book of Mormon. So they told us the magic glasses story, but there was a little too much pressure on showing this whole seer stone thing, which they also were telling people, probably so they wouldn't think about, maybe him using an outline or something and having some various materials, because things suggest he may have been using an outline with the types of mistakes that are in it. His revelations were filled with contradictions, and then that's really what the problem is. We don't have to know what books it came out of, like Hugh Nibley tries to. The church likes to frame arguments in a way so that we're going to go round in circles and never be able to come to a conclusion, which is exactly what they want, because then they can tell us, you just need to pray about it. And if you carefully examine the Gospel Topics essays, That's the strategy that they use. They always try to spin things in such a way so that you'll need to pray about it. They say there isn't adequate evidence, but they ignore a lot of evidence, and they ignore the scriptures, especially when they contradict them, like I mentioned earlier. You know, they do it in the DNA essay. They do it in the race and priesthood essay. As far as direct contradictions, they really just lead us on a goose chase. In the plural marriage one, in the book of Abraham, they try to ignore certain facts, like tying the facsimiles to Abraham supposedly saying, referencing them when actually they were produced like 2,000 years after he would have lived. Things, little things like that. And they ignore all the linguistic anachronisms and historical anachronisms and false definitions and all, the problems in the basic text of the book of Abraham that are just screwed up. They're just wrong because the person making it doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. And so that was evidently Joseph Smith. So, like I was saying, time after time, when we encounter these types of things, that they lead us to believe, oh, this is evidence because, we found Nahum, so Joseph Smith couldn't have known that, so he must be a prophet, so everything else is true. That's like the Cleon Skousen. That's like the Hugh Nibley thing saying, well, what the brethren have said. The Book of Mormon is true. We claim it's true. So pray about it and you'll know it. And if it is true, that means Joseph Smith's a prophet. And if Joseph Smith's a prophet, he's a prophet of the God of Israel. So all of this stuff is true that we tell you. And that means the LDS Church is true. Forget the other 150 Mormon churches. Screw them. This one is true. And all these are false assumptions. Just like from the very beginning, saying, well, if Joseph Smith knew what Nahum was and put it in the Book of Mormon, it must be true. It must have really been Lehi that put that. Who gives a crap about the DNA saying they're all from Siberia 15,000 years ago? They love to use these false assumptions or start an argument based on a lie and get you into it. Like, Joseph Smith, it was okay. Yeah, sure, he was married to all these other women that were other guys' wives. He was married and they weren't having sex, so it's all okay. But he wasn't married to him. It was illegal. He never said that revelation, he denied that it existed. But we got like Jedi Mormon spouting what the apologists saying, well, this isn't doctrine because they haven't decided it's doctrine. Who hasn't? The board of directors? Well, Joseph Smith, he didn't say we need a board of directors. He said that Jesus said, thou shalt give heed unto all his words as if, from mine own mouth. So, in all patience and faith or, whatever, it wasn't about a corporate board of directors. When he spoke it, he wanted people to listen now. But now, no, it's not only doctrine if, the 12 of them, 12 and the 3, if the Q15 meet on it and decide, then it's doctrine. So that means, like when Jedi, for instance, was saying the other day, in the comments, that the King Follett discourse isn't doctrine. Well, Jedi, Joseph Smith said that these things were true. He said God once lived on an earth. He went from there and progressed to become a god, and that we have got to learn how to become gods. And he said a lot of things in that discourse. You got to read the whole thing. So whether or not the Q15 voted on this crap or not, here's the deal. Either Joseph Smith was telling the truth or he was making this crap up like everything else he did. Like whatever he told Emma when she caught him screwing Fanny in the barn. He made everything up. Sometimes he had to make things up even faster than other times, like maybe in the barn. The bottom line is the guy made stuff up constantly, and he's been caught time after time after time. It just doesn't add up. So, the bottom line is with these things, it's much more simple than they make it. They purposely make it complicated. They purposely frame arguments in a way where it's difficult to win. It's not about that. Joseph Smith was running, a gigantic brothel, essentially, with the spiritual wife system. 100 times, worse. I mean, they said he was involved with 30 or 40 women, but he had like 600 maybe in the spiritual wife system, according to Joseph Jackson, whom I have no reason to disbelieve. And if Joseph Smith, talks bad about him, that's the first indication that someone's telling the truth. If Joseph Smith talks trash about Sarah Pratt, William Law, Jane Law, that's the first indication. That's the best indication that I need to believe them and listen to them. And then when I find their stories are corroborating, it helps. It helps a lot when you find people that are followers of Joseph Smith and Brigham Young corroborating things that people, said about him that didn't like him or didn't like him after a while. They liked him before. Everybody that liked Joseph Smith at the first ran into trouble with him. You got your three witnesses, but Joseph Smith condemned each of those people. He individually condemned David Whitmer, Martin Harris, and especially Oliver Cowdery. Called them horrible names, said horrible things about them, but this is who God chose to, witness the amazing disappearing golden plates. And choose the 12 apostles. The more you look at the story, the more you have to say, this stuff only adds up to one thing, and it's what Sarah Pratt and Joseph Jackson told us, and William Law. That these guys were running a criminal enterprise, and that Joseph Smith and his pals were doing what a lot of cult leaders do. Getting a lot of gratification from women they were able to manipulate. So, it's a lot simpler than whether or not, Joseph Smith how he would have known about Nahum possibly, or some other straw we can grasp at to say, oh, the Book of Mormon must have been true. One day they'll find Zarahemla. That's not what it's about. If we look at the doctrine, it doesn't add up. If you say, oh, it's so much better than Christianity because people that, would have just gone to hell according to the Christian God, we can baptize them for the dead. If God was so good, would he have them rotting in hell or spirit prison? The choices aren't great if you really read the scriptures for these people. They're in the same place as freaking Adolf Hitler, waiting for the Mormon missionaries to get them the hell out by saying, there's been a baptism done for you, or hopefully there will be, and if you just say you believe now, it'll all be okay and you can get the hell out of hell. If you really think about this, you're like, okay, so God would throw me in hell to freaking roast? I mean, the Book of Mormon says it's fire and brimstone. It's not sounding like a good place. As a matter of fact, the Book of Mormon gospel is completely different. It's Christianity. It just says you're roasting forever. If you thought that children need to be baptized, that little children, doesn't specify what age, so maybe you guessed the wrong age. You thought 7-year-olds needed to be baptized. You're going to hell if you died while you're in the thought. It says if you die while you're thinking that little children need to be baptized, you are going to hell. You're going to roast. Your soul cannot be saved. How freaking ridiculous is that? How ridiculous is the Moroni chapter 10 verse 3, when the beginning of the promise to get a testimony, to have God tell you it's true, the first prerequisite is to believe that God is merciful. That's great if you can't read, but if you've read the Old Testament, there's really no way you can actually say that and be honest. I had Paul Gregerson giving me crap the other day on one of these videos, and he's like, if you don't believe in God, why are you using the scriptures? And I'm like, where did I say I didn't believe in God? I just think he's an asshole. Read the scriptures. He's not a nice guy. He murders his own children. If I became a Mormon god, if you became a Mormon god or goddess, would you roast your children? Would you drown them all because some of them pissed you off? And you drowned all the animals and all their little children? Or you burned Sodom and Gomorrah? Do you think there might have been a few children there that were, not doing whatever the bad men were doing? Nah, we'll just burn them all. What the hell? Would you really have Moses murder people for picking up sticks on the Sabbath day? Did you watch the World Series on Sunday? If Moses was there, he'd make a group activity out of killing you because you should have been singing praises to Yahweh instead of watching the Dodger game. I used to read some of these things when I was really active. Well, except for a couple of years when I was a teenager and figured out that the intelligence flow to me. Well, I joined the church as a teenager. But I was reading the Section 89, and I'm reading it in the same chair that I had this other spiritual experience in, and I'm reading Section 89, and I'm looking at it, and it says, mild drinks of barley are good. Well, whiskey's pretty strong, and it said don't drink strong drink, and beer, compared to whiskey, is pretty mild, and it's made out of barley. So what the heck am I supposed to think they're talking about? Well, if you drink a six-pack of that, you can get pretty wasted. So then it's easier to say, well, this is the same thing as a few shots of whiskey in quick succession. And if you happen to have it in the pantry for your uncle when he visits, it's not a great idea for teenagers to have that stuff available. It's not a great idea for 3-year-olds to have that stuff available. First time I got drunk, I was 3 years old. Parents left a big bottle and a glass of wine out there, and they wondered why I was acting funny when the glass was empty. It wasn't my fault. Anyway, if I called this video Ramble On, that would probably be pretty appropriate. I've been accused of sounding like it was a stream of consciousness, and I'd say that this one probably fits that category. Let me get back into the Paul Gregerson thing. What else did he use for his false narrative attacks on me recently? Which typify LDS apologia, framing an argument in a way that if you get suckered into it, you're going to go round and round. He said, how dare you accuse Hallie of being brainwashed? I never said anything about being brainwashed, Paul. And I'm pretty sure you're informed enough to know that brainwashing is not the same as like group mind control. Okay? I know you're not that ignorant, and you're not a stupid man. You're eccentric, and probably completely nuts, but you're not stupid. Therefore, you framed that in a way that you were setting me up. So I had to identify that and say, sorry, Paul, I never said she was brainwashed. There's a difference between mind control and brainwashing. And within brainwashing, generally, it's an antagonistic captor, and you know they're your enemy. With mind control, it's not. Dodger game, they're using mind control on us right there, and all the sports stuff. Sure, they use all sorts of techniques to, they'll tell us we need to be patriotic, which means, thank you for your service, which means you're protecting our freedom by invading countries all over the world. Sorry, but, that's the reality of it. And if you live in the Middle East, you might realize that a little more easily. Nobody was protecting anybody's freedom when, Baghdad was bombed. And there's been a lot since then, and there was a lot before then. What about the Philippines? Yeah, I don't want to get on that. You look at U.S. imperialism, it's all over. I mean, you send the Christian missionaries, get a revolution started in Hawaii, and then you annex the place. You beat the Spanish in the Spanish-American War, and you say, here's a deal. We're playing Monopoly or Risk. You give us the Philippines that you've colonialized, and we'll just take that. And the U.S. said, okay, great. Since we just kicked your butts here in Mexico, we're going to take the Philippines away from you. And they go in there, and some of the Philippines people said, you know what, we want our independence. We believe in the Constitution. You know, the United States says that's just a bunch of bullshit for our people to believe. Screw you. We're doing the same damn thing to you that the British did to us. We're bigger. See what the hell you can do about it. So they slaughtered like a couple 100,000 people, from what I've read. I mean, you know, not all of it was shooting them. Maybe about 20,000 of them they said were combatants. The rest of them just got killed along the way, you know. And some of them might have been starving or disease or, you know, kind of things that happened to people in Iraq, you know, when you bomb the water supply and the hospitals and stuff like that. Collateral damage. But these are all mechanisms of control of the people, and we don't have to buy in to the falsely framed arguments that we get from the church apologists and their wannabes that I've been, you know, having some of these conversations with, if you can call them that, lately. That's why I tell, that's why I say to, you know, say to some of you people that I don't think Jedi's all that bad. I don't think he's into that. I think he's just doing the best with what he's got left in his, you know, in his head on this stuff. But some of these other folks, the guys at the top of the food chain, and then some there's other guys that buy into this crap that are noticeably using techniques to falsely frame arguments and do the kind of crap that, you know, Leo Wienerger and looked like Paul Gregerson was pulling on me. You know, trying to pull on me in the last few days. It's just BS. So, don't get caught in that. The spiritual wife system eclipses what happened with the way Brian Hales frames things. Joseph Smith wasn't married to a bunch of these girls. That's not what I call marriage. Brigham Young was. But he just found a way to cover things up and continue his ability to carouse or have a lot of women. Joseph Smith's system was a lot worse. A lot more women affected by it, and it would just absolutely demolish the church if people really understood what he did in the spiritual wife system, if they understood the criminal enterprise that was being run in Nauvoo. And people don't understand what the Danites were doing, what Joseph Smith's inner circle was doing. The theology doesn't work if you think about it. The Book of Mormon narrative doesn't work. The stories in the Book of Mormon do not work. They're physically impossible things. And the miracles of God BS doesn't work. God contradicts himself, and he lies. He breaks the rules that he says, you know, qualify him to be God. It says in the Book of Mormon, God would cease to be God. And that's a concept that violates the Christian definition of God. In fact, like I said in another one, why does anybody have to have somebody atone for your sins? If God's all powerful, why does he need people to pay? Why couldn't he just forgive? Can you forgive your child? You know, or would you say, no way in hell are you being forgiven for anything. I want blood out of you. I mean, seriously. If he's God, why would he want animals murdered so he can sniff the burning flesh all the way from Kolob in order to forgive? Or why would he say, murder my most innocent child that I came all the way down from Kolob to have sex with his mother so that he could be, you know, resurrected or something and have the power to be sinless, and I'll make it so you have to kill him. Someone has to kill him. Someone has to be the bad guy, so they'll have to roast in hell. But so some of you can be forgiven. That's our plan. Or for Adam and Eve to progress, they'll have to disobey me, and then I'll be a jerk and throw them out of the garden. But it's their own damn fault. But there was no way they could progress unless they rebelled against me. And there's no way that they'd learn to be modest unless Lucifer taught them. There's no way they'd learn that they needed to have the eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil unless Lucifer helps them with that. But because Lucifer's doing all this, I'll just, he already tried to save everybody so they could all stay in the celestial kingdom, and I didn't want that. So I sent him to hell, along with everyone that agreed with him. So you have to disobey according to Lucifer and Eve, and God set up the plan this way. This is Mormonism, and you decide whether you think Christianity is different or not. But Eve says right there in the temple, if we hadn't have done this, we'd have never had children. We couldn't have progressed. We wouldn't have known the bitter from the sweet and all these things, these great things that Lucifer just taught us. And we wouldn't have these beautiful fig leaves. He wouldn't have taught us why we need to be modest. We'd be standing there naked talking to God and Jesus and, didn't even realize we were supposed to be embarrassed. Lucifer opened our eyes. And he knew that he did. In the endowment, Lucifer knows what he's doing. He says, I've been doing that which has been done in other worlds. So if his goal was to screw everybody over, why was he helping? How dishonest is it for God to put Adam and Eve in a situation where the only way they can progress is to break his commandments? How full of crap is that? But we're not allowed to think. Brethren have spoken, the thinking's been done, right? And like Jedi was trying to tell me that, earlier today, something like, that isn't doctrine. They never said God had lots of wives. Well, Brigham Young taught you had to have a lot of wives. Section 132 says Joseph Smith couldn't refuse this principle and become a god. So are we supposed to believe that God is asking Joseph Smith to do something he wasn't willing to do himself? Besides that, how do you have 350,000 children a day on this earth, plus other worlds, who are the begotten sons and daughters unto God, according to section 76, even though it says there are no other begotten sons and daughters in the previous verse in that section? How do you do that with one wife? Poor girl, having 4.3 babies per second on this earth, just to keep this earth, from losing ground. It's called thinking. You think through this stuff and you go, you know what? How is this better than some of the other ridiculous fables that we've heard? And how do we believe a God who has these Jews write this stuff that doesn't work, with the creation process and when death comes into the world and all that stuff, especially you add the Book of Mormon into it. And then you notice that the Noah and the Ark story obviously isn't true, or the American Indians wouldn't be on the American continent because they'd have been washed away, because they supposedly came a long time before the flood. And they wouldn't be here for the Lamanites to disappear into, so we could say that, there's still a possibility of finding their DNA somewhere. The only way for that to happen is for these guys that prove that Genesis was a lie. But these guys are supposed to have credibility. They're our default. Why? Because you learned it since you were a child? That makes it true? This is all the process of mental manipulation, and it goes under the heading of mind control. People just don't know what those words mean. They don't understand how they're manipulated. We believe things that are ridiculous. So, anyway, Dodger game's starting. And yeah, the whole sports thing's just part of it too, but hey, I'm not going to get sucked into drinking Budweiser or saying thank you for your service for invading another country. Rambling off. I wonder if Jesus likes the Dodgers. Dodger game out.